The IPO market continues to stay busy. This week we've got Gigamon. Now this is a switching company. It competes with Juniper, Brocade, Cisco, those big names. Can it compete effectively? I'm joined by the Director of Research at Equities.com, Francis Gaskins. So Francis, you sound like you like this one.
Well, I like it because they have a niche, a vertical niche, and what they do is they provide traffic visibility over switches, and it's something the big guys don't do quite as well. And if you look at the gross margins, Gigamon has 79% gross margins, and the other three you mentioned have about 61 or 62. So they can get a little bit of premium pricing for their product. Their revenue is up about 43% to 97 million for 2012, and it was up another 50% or so for the March quarter. So they have this increase in top line revenue that investors are very, very hungry for. They made money in 2010, 11, and 12, but the rate of money went down in 2012 from 2011. I think they're spending a lot of money on engineering and marketing and sales to compete with the big guys. So I think their momentum will continue. For them to do well in the aftermarket, they have to, of course, see break even pretty soon.
All right, and certainly we've seen some good earnings out of some of the companies in that area lately. Then we have Aratana, and that is a pet med company. You're not too thrilled about this one, and I'm surprised because people are spending millions on their pets these days.
Boy, that's for sure. It's a company that was formed in 2010, and they have an accumulated deficit of 25 million, which is not bad for a company kind of in their business. They're an in-licensing company that went out and in-licensed a lot of three main patents, intellectual property. And what they're doing is they're conducting studies now, clinical studies, which are different than clinical trials, and it'll help dogs and cats with their osteoporosis and pain. So there's a big market for that. The only thing is, I don't know, when they'll actually have a product, when they'll get it out. Their competition, there's a lot of large companies competing against them. So I would wait on that one. And just see how their studies and basically see how their clinical trials work. They expect to have some announcements at the end of this year, first of next year.
So there you have it. Aratana is an early stage pet med company that you might want to avoid, but Gigamon, even though it's competing with the big boys, looks like that's an IPO you can sink your teeth into.